Sit up straight. Now remember, children, why are we fighting? We're fighting to keep the pink bits pink. People are living and dying to keep those bits pink. One, two, three.
Pack up your troubles in your own kit bag and smile, smile, smile.
They were frightened, and if you cuddled them and said, oh, well, it's all right, they thought they were safe then.
We didn't really know what war was. It was more of an adventure.
If you found shrapnel, good gracious, it was wonderful. A lot of the children would say, look, I've collected this. Gosh, I've got 6 pieces today.
Smile, smile, smile.
Again last night, the Luftwaffe carried out a successful attack on Plymouth. Nothing remains of the city but piles of rubble interspersed with vast bomb craters, with the result that chaos has disrupted the entire way of life of the people. Plymouth is Coventryed. Plymouth is devastated beyond repair.
No other city in the world, I should think, had to endure what worse than Plymouth had. Some of us have prophesied before, if you don't stop Hitler in Spain, if you don't stop him bombing Guernica, he'll be coming Plymouth later on, and we actually said that in our newspapers. When it happened, of course, it was absolutely devastating.
Ranged from 50 kilograms, which were quite little ones, which would take a house out quite easily, to these great big bombs which are known as Satans, which were very, very, very powerful. They only tended to carry one of those because they were just so heavy for the aircraft. Junkers 88, their wonder bomber. It was very fast, quite manoeuvrable, twin-engined aircraft, and had quite a high degree of success in the Battle of Britain.
I can remember the siren going off, and I can remember my mother, she'd never say Angela, she'd say Angela. And I always knew, it was very strange how I remember that tone. You would lift it out of your bed, stuck in your siren suit, carried into the air raid shelter, and then there used to be a lull, and my father would go and make tea. I mean, it sounds so terribly glamorous, but of course it wasn't.
We had all the barrage balloons, Central Park, Blockhouse, Penley, everywhere barrage balloons, Ack Battery at Central Park. People would see, Army personnel, Army trucks, especially with the Ack batteries. They never shot a lot down, but it was kept the morale up.
We had a stick of bombs, and I was coming downstairs with my baby in my arms, and I bumped all the way down the stairs, and when I got down to the bottom of the stairs, they eventually asked the doctor to come in and see, and he said, oh, I can't see much wrong with your back. He said, there's plenty of people in London, a lot worse off than you.
In 5 nights alone, 390 civilians died, and there were over 400 serious casualties. 1,500 houses were destroyed beyond repair, and 15 times that number seriously damaged. And those figures are only part of the final total.
A lot of people picked up all their bits and pieces and went out on the moors during the night and came in the morning. And, that must have been an awful life to lead for months on end, but they felt safer there.
My mother and father, they used to gather all their customers around them and poke them all in the lorry, and they'd all come down, and I had a larger sitting room, a very large kitchen, and we used to put them all in there. They'd get into sleeping bags and sit on chairs anywhere. And the amazing part of it was, I used to go to bed as usual, and if we were lucky enough not to get a raid that night, I'd get up in the morning and the place was clear. They'd be all gone, they'd just gather up their things and go.
I must say that the camaraderie between people at that time was absolutely wonderful. Everybody would help one another. There wasn't any sort of animosity or anything like that. You would all help one another.
We were in a communal shelter. When we came out in the morning, it was gone. You know, everything, the house, well, everything in it. So we were billeted then out to Neath Road, St Jude's, right behind Salisbury Road Church. We were out there not many months, and they dropped a landmine on the church and took the back of the house out. We were all in the shelter, the Anderson shelter. They'd dig us out. Most of the people in the houses of Salisbury Road, and quite a number of the kids that I went to school with were killed. Oh yeah, you saw a lot of dead bodies. I mean, you'd wander around the next day after the raid, and you'd see them still digging at streets. One or two houses in the middle had been hit, and you'd see them trying to see if they could get anybody out or if there was any survivors there. But just everything went on around you.
I can remember being frightened of the noise, and I always remember at one point there was a tremendous blue flame, and I always remember them thinking it was very near, and it was the family at the bottom of the road. They had a direct hit on the house, and they were in their air raid shelter, and the neighbours went in and said, look, your house is gone, why not come over with us? And they said, no, we might just well stay here. And minutes later, they had a direct hit on the Anderson shelter, and everybody was killed. One night, my mother decided we hadn't missed an air raid on Plymouth, and she said, right, we're going to get out of Plymouth. We'll go to Plympton. And I can remember we walked to Plympton. And there used to be a tremendous amount of people, anything to get away from the air raids. And we'd walk along the Plymouth Road, and we went up, I think it was Plimbridge Road, and the vicarage. And the vicar took us all in, and we laid down, and we went to sleep on the floor. And but that was the one night we didn't have an air raid. So we still didn't miss an air raid.
Right now, children, business as usual. Let's practice our 5 times table. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10.
What did I think of Germans at the time? I think the Germans at the time as much as I think about them now, I think. I had no time for them at all.
You were frightened of them. You know, I think you listened to what people said, and you listened to your parents, and you were quite frightened.
I saw a couple of dead ones over at Painley. A plane came down over there. Painley Fields, that's up beyond where the Painley School is now. There was a barrage balloon site up there, and they came down with a plane. Wanted to see it, you see. It was fascinating, I suppose, but... And then you thought to yourself, you know, oh, that's a body there.
So came the captain. He asked me, you speak English? I said, no. You speak French? No. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Ja.
Helmut had recently come back from flying in the Mediterranean, and his squadron had been assigned to fly targets against Britain. They'd successfully carried out their mission, and they were on their way back when they had the misfortune to be intercepted by a Polish manned night fighter. Devastating cannon and machine gun fire hit the aircraft. It was obvious to them they wouldn't be able to go on, so at a certain time I think they all started bailing out, and the aircraft was left to its own devices.
The cool right Fläche, die rechte Fläche, and the right engine burned. This gasoline, you know. And I get up and look for my radio man because he was very wounded. It was only fire, but I had no chance to look or to wait. So I closed my eyes and let me fall down.
My phone went and said, Auntie, come up quickly. There's a plane on fire outside the door. But it was just, as I say, a flaming mess when I got there. And I think my sister-in-law, who was a large, stout woman, and I was afraid she was going to have a heart attack, you know.
The plane that attacked them successfully landed back at Exeter, and the next day the two Polish crew members came over to have a look at their handiwork.
They played Ring of Roses around this burnt-out aeroplane. They were really delighted, wild with excitement they were, and they danced around it, made a tremendous amount of fuss.
All we know is exactly what happened to Helmut. He landed and quickly hid his parachute and then decided to go on the run in the hope, I don't know what to do, but to try and get away from Plymouth or to try and get his way back to France.
I get up, I looked, have everything wrong, took my pistol, because he told us you have to be, if you see English farmer, he comes with a fork, you know.
He apparently wandered through the suburbs of Plymouth and had the misfortune just to walk into what was believed to be a Home Guard patrol who captured him immediately.
We stand there and talk. Suddenly came the Land Rover, an English officer of the Navy, a policeman with black hat, and two English sailors with bayonet, gun. I think, what's he want to do here? Oh, for myself! Oi, 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 I thought, what's the matter now?
Winston Churchill and Mrs. Churchill toured the ravaged city in May.
We will have no truce or parley with you or the grisly gang who work your wicked will. You do your worst, and we will do our best.
Thus it continued, with an ever-lessening impact after the first terrors, until the last all clear of all in the April of 1944. By then, the damage had become incalculable, with a total list of almost 4,500 civilian casualties and an immensity of unrevealed service personnel dead.
Not only was Plymouth hit harder almost than any other city, but Plymouth also started to make its recovery before any of the others. It was a terrible scene to clear up, and people thought the devastation was so great that there couldn't be any recovery, but after a period, a year or so, people were planning how to deal with it, and here in Plymouth, we were making those kind of plans before anybody else.
What a mess it all is. It's such a waste. That's what gets me.
But what an opportunity.
What do you mean, sir?
A town should be for the townsfolk what the country estate is for the rich man. A pleasant home to live in. Without this, we might never have had the chance.
Trees and green and parks, and it's going to be the most beautiful city in the world.
Will there be sand pits?
Yes, there'll be lots of sand pits and heaps of swimming pools.
Will there be air raid shelters?
No, we've seen the last of them, thank goodness.
In that case, I'm definitely against the plan.
Why?
If they're going to take in all the air raid shelters, how am I going to be able to play houses with Susan?
Let us have courage, determination, and vision to take advantage of this opportunity.
Rubbish. Built the wrong way around.
Sometimes I wonder whether it has been built as it should do, because it's very, very drafty in the city of Plymouth.
The opportunity of raising a city magnificent in proportions and affording glorious opportunities for all its citizens is an ideal for which we should happily aim.
People will come in now and they'll look at it and they'll say, oh, good gracious, we need the character. Where's all the character of Plymouth? Well, that happened when it was bombed.
Concrete jungle. Don't like it.
By this plan, we can make ours one of the most beautiful cities in the whole wide world.
Yeah. To some extent, because we were going ahead so fast, trying to be so fast in dealing with the problem, we may have made some mistakes, but if you take the whole thing, the whole tremendous effort that was made by the people of Plymouth to deal with what had suffered in the war and to do it as speedily as we could and to get back into operation in a peaceful society. No, I think it was a tremendous achievement, and the criticisms mainly fall by the wayside.
Our gratitude to all our splendid allies goes forth from all our hearts in this island and throughout the British Empire. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing. Advance, Britannia! Long live the cause of freedom! God save the King!
A cheerful, rowdy bunch, desperately eager to get home. But after 5 years away, none of us had the least idea what we were coming back to. Some of us made out we were pessimistic, just so we couldn't be disappointed. Time of destruction is ended. The era, we never talked that sort of stuff in the desert. But the boys talked a lot about their towns, hometowns.
When a whole city was flattened, it was like a hand had just taken everything down. I can remember the smell of all the shattered buildings, the burnt wood, and that smell stayed with me, and I'm sure it has done with a lot of people.
All these lovely homes had been devastated and people had been killed. It was a very disheartening time, and you thought it was never going to end.
By a dreadful paradox, Hitler had served Plymouth almost nobly. He had carried out for it in one stroke a gigantic clearance scheme, one of the mightiest in all history. Even before the war, there had been tentative plans to reshape the city, but none on as massive a scale as confronted the city's leaders now.
So they called in Professor Abercrombie, and the businessman made history by inviting him to treat the city centre as an open site. Beyond that, nobody quite knew what the professor was up to.
I think one really has to pay tribute to the way the city was rebuilt. There was, first of all, a cross-party consensus. Labour was in power after the war. The city fathers were very remarkable men, many of them with a history of the dockyard work, and the saying was, if you wanted to see the key people in the city, you better go to Central Hall, Methodist Hall, and that's where they were on a Sunday. And the MPs worked very closely with them, and they broke a lot of regulations. They just drove on with the rebuilding of Plymouth.
Indeed, I remember now vividly, just after our election, when we had the three MPs, Medland, myself, and Lucy Middleton from the other constituency, somehow or other we'd overspent the money. We'd gone ahead in Plymouth and spent hundreds of thousands of pounds, I don't know what the figure was, beyond what we were supposed to have done under their allocation, and we were hauled up to the office of the people up in London. They had to put our case. It was Alderman Medland who put the case, but yes, because he knew better. But we said to them after a while, you know, if Sir Francis Drake had waited for orders from London before he got on with the job, well, we would never have defeated the Spaniards.
Plymouth needs pale colours to respond to the sunlight. Buildings in limestone and concrete. Flat and vertical masses to give balance and an interesting skyline. What's really needed is a city to cheer people up.
There was full employment, so most folk were happy. They were earning money, and then the big firms would start paying halfpenny over the rate. So everybody would move. Let's go down to Dudley Coles this week. They're paying halfpenny over from Aying Coles, and you know, everybody was happy. They were beginning to, things were beginning to come back in the shops. Dingoes was up.
It was marvellous. I went down a little way and there was this lovely shop called Dingle's, and they made a special offer when they opened of Tide washing powder. Dingle's had a special occasion and opened their doors, and gave everybody a packet of Tide washing powder. We thought that was marvellous.
If you lived in the time that I did with the war and we had nothing, and then all of a sudden up came this lovely city with wide roads, modern buildings. And that really, if you look back and you think of the time when it was actually built, it was a wonderful idea.
That looks like something from the Grapes of Wrath.
I don't know where to begin. Tell me, do you like your new houses better than the ones you came from? Oh, yes. Any complaints? Yes. What are they?
I think that we suffered really from the Abercrombie plan. I mean, I know it's unfashionable to say so, because there was always this tremendous feeling what an inspiration it was in the war to replan the city. And it must have given heart to the people who were here during the bombing to see it. But there were flaws in that plan.
The old Plymouth was a warmer, nicer place, I think, to live in. But now the new Plymouth seems to be so strange to everyone, and I suppose we should get used to it, and probably in a few years' time, after it's been built a bit longer. But the old Plymouth was really homely.
Years ago, I was sort of part of a thing which they asked you what was the building that you most loathed in the world that you wanted to knock down. And mine was, and remains, the car park by St. Charles's Church. I think it is the most hideous thing, and the sooner a bulldozer or a stick of dynamite blows it up, the better.
Put your confidence in us. Give us your faith and your blessing. And under providence, all will be well. We shall not fail or falter. We shall not weaken or tire. Neither the sudden shock of battle nor the long-drawn trials of vigilance and exertion will wear us down. Give us the tools, and we will finish the job.
We fought to save Plymouth, even despite the bombing. We fought to save the city then, and we saved it from Hitler taking over. If it hadn't been for people of Plymouth standing up to it, well, Hitler could have come, and if he'd smashed the dockyard, maybe he would have won altogether anyhow. Well, we stopped him, and the people of Plymouth did more than any other part of the country in doing it, and Plymouth has emerged from terrible disasters in the past, and we're never going to be struck down in the future.
In a country where every shade of opinion is allowed, almost anything is possible. Cities of tomorrow, what will they be? Who can tell? For their story is still being written by the citizens of today.